County Branch NAACP.
Welcome, Mr. Patterson. I'm Danyell Smith. How you doing?
Very nice to meet you.
Awesome. You as well. Thank you. So, Dr. Faye, Mr. Patterson is one of our panelists, as well as Miss Makita Scott.
It's
too.
Roland Patterson Jr.
Yes.
Oh, we got you, man.
Yeah, and Dorian. So in here, I see Dorian as well.
How do you pronounce Mr. Bailey's first name? Is it Corey or
So
K-O-R-E?
Corey, he may or may not. He was our young panelist. He's only 17 years old, and he was on the last time. But he said he wanted to do it, but I didn't get a response from him. So I said, I just want you to have the name just in case. So the ones in parentheses, those are the individuals who have not responded but said they wanted to do it. I didn't want to have them come on and then you didn't have their name already. So I just put that just as a caution, just to be ready. We gotta stay ready to be ready.
And Danyell at 6 o'clock.
It's 6 o'clock. Okay. I don't know if all the panelists are on. Gloria Morgan. I'm not sure. Hi, Gloria.
It started anyway. It's 6 o'clock.
Yeah. So you guys ready? Ready for me to get started? Because I'm just going to say something about a moderator.
Let's get her done.
Okay, so we're going to get started, and as the people start coming in, you guys, we'll get it rolling. So my name is Danyell Winky Smith, and along with Michelle Jackson, we are both the individuals to put this together with Win with Black Women Maryland. We're in the Baltimore region, and we have a couple of our members on here. So we just thought that this would be one of our projects we do after going across the country and doing voter registration and voter education. And we realized that there were a number of people who were misinformed and they had disinformation. And we just wanted to make sure that when we do voter registration, that our prospective voters are informed and educated as well. So what we decided to do is just have, a couple of short videos to help educate them on a few things, and then a group of panelists who would be able to discuss, with them, back and forth. They've asked some questions, and you all can talk about what we're doing. So right now, I will introduce our esteemed moderator for tonight, who is a phenomenal young woman, Dr. Faye Williams. Dr. Faye Williams is a civil rights and human rights activist, attorney, entrepreneur, former president and CEO of the National Congress of Black Women, and founder of the Dick Gregory Society. So with that, and I will just leave it up to you. Dr. Faye Williams, thank you so much.
Thank you, Don, and welcome everybody to this wonderful town hall meeting we're about to have. This is the 13th annual month of nonviolence, family, and voters' rights and opportunities. We have a lot going on here this evening. We have a wonderful group of speakers this evening to give us all this wisdom. And Dawn, before we go on, I want to I always recognize national, international leaders. And Dr. Stephanie Myers is among us. I've known her since she was a little girl when we lived in Los Angeles. I always have to say that. She is the founder of Black Women for Positive Change. And of course, Dawn, you, along with some others, but Dawn, you also are in charge of the Baltimore chapter of Black Women for Positive Change. Our subject for this evening, as I said, is dispelling the myths within our communities. And we have a wonderful group of people who will be talking with us this evening. I'd like to introduce them. If you are on, just say here so that we know to call on you to go ahead and give us all that wisdom. So first of all, Honorable Dawn Hester, Treasurer, City of Norfolk. Dawn, are you on? Okay, let's move on to Honorable Cheryl Pasteur, who is the Baltimore County District A representative.
And Dawn is on, Dr. Faye.
Dawn is on. Okay, great.
Dawn Hester and Danyell Smith, Baltimore chapter. Danyell.
Okay. Danyell Smith, well, what did I say? What did I call her? A wonderful name,
Call me
I'm sure.
Danyell, so you were okay.
Okay, all right. We have this Wonder Woman that I've heard so much about, Miss Holly Holiday, president of an organization herself called Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote, and the convener of Win with Black, co-convener of Win with Black Women, and they're doing a great job. Okay, is Holly on? Not yet? All right, let's move on
She
to
had an
Ms.
event, but
Makita
she'll be
Scott,
on. Yeah.
who is a community leader and former chair of the Baltimore School Board. Welcome. We have Reverend Makita Scott, community leader and former chair of the Baltimore, what? I missed whatever that is. Okay, you'll tell us when you come on to finish that sentence for me. Next, we have Reverend Stephen Tillett, former president of Anne Arundel NAACP, and I've had the pleasure of speaking for their chapter some years ago, so welcome.
Thank you.
I've had, we have now Dr. Dorian Rogers, State NAACP, Maryland Youth and College Division. Mr. Robert N. Patterson, I'm sorry, Roland N. Patterson, Jr., NAACP, Baltimore County First Vice President.
Bless you.
Thank you, you're on. We have Dorian Rogers, State NAACP, and he is with the State NAACP Youth and College Division. Welcome. We have Roland Patterson Jr., NAACP. Wow, NAACP is really represented here this evening. Baltimore First VP. I want you to know I'm a life member of the NAACP too. Okay, Mr. Kendrick Tillman, a business owner and the past president of the Business Greater Baltimore Black Chamber of Commerce. So I hope you know Dr. Charles DeBow, my good friend who's in charge of the national chapter. We have Jonathan Coleman, a community leader and a member of Omega Psi Phi. Is Jonathan on? All right, we'll be
He's
back to
one of
you.
the ones that may or may not be on. So
Oh, okay. Corey Bailey, student president of Parkville High School, NAACP, may or may not be on too, right? But we want to just recognize them that they were willing to do these kinds of things, and they will be. I'm sure they're somewhere in the community doing some great things. We also have Haki Ami, president of the Teaching Artists Institute. We have Derek Barnett, who is from Phi Beta Sigma. And when you're on, you can tell us your role in the community. Also, Malwan Johnson, Phi Beta Sigma. They're well represented here this evening. Let's give all of our speakers who are on and those to come a big hand.
Thank you for having us.
Hey,
Holly's on now too, Dr. Ife.
I'm sorry.
Holly, Miss Holly Holiday is on now as well.
I'm sorry, she is what?
She's on the call now.
Oh, okay, I called her name.
Oh,
Okay, we are ready to go to the panel, I believe. Are we, Danyell? Madam Chairperson of the program, are we on now with the speakers?
Yes, we're on, and you can go ahead and just call the different panelists, and they can give their 60-second brief description and bio of who they are, what they do.
Hey, we called Honorable Dawn Hester first. Is Dawn on?
Yes.
If not, Dawn?
I am here, and once again, hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us as we have this great conversation that's sorely needed in these last 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks that we have for election.
All right.
Hester, former council for the city of Norfolk. I served 12 years as a council member and as vice mayor. I served 5 years as a state delegate in Virginia, representing again the city of Norfolk. And now I currently serve as the treasurer for the city of Norfolk. So yes, I am the tax collector. And in Virginia, we are considered constitutional officers. And I've been in that position for 7 years. So that's my civic duty. I'm an educator by profession and other things as well. Look forward to talking with everyone. Thank you.
Just left your city, well, near your city, actually. I was down in Chesapeake the last few days. Okay, all right, and would you like to make a remark now about the subject, or you need to go to someone else?
So
Okay.
you do introductions right now.
Do the introductions, okay? Um, Honorable Cheryl Pastor, Baltimore City District 11A. Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. Did I unmute?
Yes, you're on now.
Okay, great. All right, I'm Delegate Cheryl Pastua, and I'm from 11A in Baltimore County. And I'm in the first term as a delegate. I sit on the Judiciary Committee. So I think my role has become all things about those who are incarcerated and those who are victims, and particularly children who we in Maryland want to incarcerate. So that's where I am, and all things that are about schools, restorative practices, taking a look at all of those things that primarily move our children socially, economically, that move our children from what we call the system. I call it the first system, into what I call the second system, and how ways in which we need to impact our young people so that they don't enter that second system. Prior to doing that, I, along with Makita Scott, I was on the Baltimore County School Board and spent 50 years, over 50 years in education, with 30 some of those years in public education and others on the college level. And I will say more as we get started.
Hey.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, and now I think we should roll the drums for our next speaker too. All the others are really important, but since I'm just meeting Miss Holly Holiday and I've heard so much about her, I think we need to roll the drums for her. Hello, Holly, how are you?
About that. Listen, this call, as we've already heard, is full of women and men who have a lot of deep and rich knowledge, including those who have served in office, which I have never had the pleasure and frankly, nor the inclination, but it is a privilege to be here amongst this amazing group of leaders. My name is Holly Holiday. I'm the president of Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote, and co-convener and lead organizer for Win with Black Women. And I am grateful to be here and can't wait to be part of this amazing discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Makita Scott. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Right.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm honored to be here with everyone. And like I said, with my former colleague on the school board, Delegate Cheryl Pastor. A little bit about me. I'm a community organizer, community leader who decided to run for office, and I was elected to the Baltimore County School Board, where I became a first African-American chairwoman. And in addition to that, I started along with Delegate Pastor, who was also on the school board with me. I started the equity committee to look at inequities within the school system, systemic inequities that related to all children, regardless of where they live in the county. And I serve on that committee now, and we look at ways to examine that. I'm also a member of Win with Black Women, and I am also very active in the community, and I'm wanting to be here tonight to hopefully answer any questions and hear from everyone and discuss the importance of voting, not only for the president, for the higher level positions, but also for down ballot positions such as school board. So thank you for your time.
Wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned that, because some people don't think about that as being important. It is ultimately important for our children. All right, let's go to Reverend Stephen Tillett. Are you here?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
All right, well, let's hear about you.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Tillett. I'm the pastor at Asbury Broadneck United Methodist Church in Annapolis, Maryland. Also a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. I'm a former president of the Anne Arundel County branch NAACP. Did some commentary for several years, political commentary on the Livonia Perryman show out of Detroit, Michigan, on doing political commentary and analysis. And have been spending a fair amount of time the last couple of months doing reels and posts, just trying to educate voters about different things relative to elections, what we're voting about and why. Not falling for the okie doke, which by the way is the title of a book I wrote, Stop Falling for the Okie Doke, How the Lie of Race Continues to Undermine Our Country, that was released in 2017. And I'm glad to be with you.
Okay, let's move on to Mr. Roland Patterson Jr.
Good evening, everyone. In the interest of being brief, I do civil rights with the local Baltimore County branch. We fight cases of discrimination. I am honored to be with all of you and impressed with all of the work that you're doing. And I look forward to our exchange.
Thank you. Kendrick Tillman. Mr. Tillman?
I don't think it's here.
I don't think he's here yet.
Okay, not here yet. Okay, we'll come back to him if he comes in. All right, let's move down to Jonathan Coleman, a community leader and member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity.
So he is one of the young men that I wasn't sure he hadn't responded
Okay,
yet. Yeah,
no problem.
thank you.
Let's-
I'm sorry.
All right, let's move on to Corey Bailey, the student president of Parkville High. He's not here either, is he?
He's one of the students, yes.
Okay, all right. Haki Ahmed, president of the Teaching Artistry Institute.
Sure, yes, thank you. So very quickly, Teaching Artists Institute, we work with different artists, mostly in Africa, but also here in the United States doing civil rights tours. I'm also a former Central Committee member, Democratic Central Committee member and treasurer in Baltimore City, and former vice chair of the African American Caucus in the Maryland Democratic Party. And I'm the treasurer of Baltimore Community Chapter of National Action Network. So just wanted to plug those in there.
I'm a member of the National Action Network too, under Sister Nia Shabazz here in Nia in 2X. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up her name. She'd get me for that, Nia 2X. I'm a member of her chapter here in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. All right, let's move on to Derek Barnett, Phi Beta Sigma. Derek is not here yet, okay.
Yeah, he's unmuting.
Oh, okay. All right, and you had another title, so give us that title. I missed it. I knew you were from Phi Beta Sigma.
Okay, actually, I'm the executive director for Culturally Conscious Connections, where we try to connect young adults to STEM and STEAM-related professions and professionals. I'm a 50-year resident of Baltimore County. I live in the 10th Congressional District. I've always been a political advocate and community advocate within our neighborhoods. Involved in a lot of different activities as it relates to board members and things of that nature. Served on the African American Cultural Board, served on the Negro League Baseball Museum Board. Just done a lot of things to try to stay connected to our community.
Very good. Let's move on to Malwan Johnson, Phi Beta Sigma.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be joined here tonight. Such an esteemed panel. Again, like you said, my name is Malwan Johnson. I'm the International Director of Social Action for Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, also the President and CEO of Alliance Strategic Partners, LLC. Proud resident of Baltimore County. Just happy to be here to share any information that I have with the good folks.
All right. Did I miss anyone? If not, let's move on to the topic for this evening, dispelling the myths within our communities. And we know there are many, and there will be many more between now and November 5th. So what are some of those myths? Anyone can speak up who wants to address that first.
Your vote doesn't count.
I think one myth is that Black men aren't going to participate in this election. I believe that's a myth.
Absolutely. And I think the other myth is that Black men don't support Black women.
Okay, well, tell us about that. Let's go back to you, Mr. Burnett. Tell us about that myth and why it's a myth. Why do we keep hearing that that's what's going on?
Well, I honestly believe this goes beyond this particular election. You know your history, and most of us on this do, because I know I'm speaking to the choir. Whenever a major city or anything major has its pitfalls or downfalls, they always try to place a Black man there to follow up. In this case, in scenario, they're trying to blame the non-participation of a 7% population of African-American males that will help decide this election or help not decide this election. And I don't think that's the case. Realistically, and I don't want to continue to broaden the conversation, but I just have to say this. I think we should be focusing more of our attention, energy, and efforts on convincing the white women of America to vote for Kamala Harris, because they make up 55% of the political electorate. And behind closed, when they go behind that curtain and it's time to make that vote, that's going to be the body that's going to make the decision for the country.
Yeah, I'm certainly with you on that. I've worked a lot with white women, and I'm surprised that I'm not hearing from some of them that I know personally that I've worked very hard with. So I'm, beginning to contact some of them to find out where they are. Again, just because they tell me where they are doesn't mean they're going to do what they should do. They didn't do what they should do with Hillary Clinton. So we know that we can't rely on all of them. That's why it's so important, I think, for all of us to be involved in this election. And I think it's not time for us to argue with someone who may have said that. I know sometimes I look at things that they're polling, and when you click on yes, it will go down to the no's, and we click on no, it goes up to the yes. I know that that's a trick, so we have to watch out for that polling. We don't know that the polling is always true. Okay, let's see. There was someone just after you spoke wanted to talk about the subject.
Brother Malwan Johnson.
Yes.
No, I was just saying that one of the myths is that Black men don't support or necessarily support Black women or women's issues, and we found that not to be true, especially with overturning of Roe versus Wade and bringing that question back to the ballot box. We see that over 80% of Black men actually do support reproductive rights, and over 50% would say that actually has an effect on Black men as well, or just men in general as well. And so to say that Black men don't support women and women's issues is just kind of a myth that we have data that support when they're on the ballot and those issues are on the ballot, that we absolutely support our women, and specifically Black women in this case.
Mm-hmm. Well, I heard a few very young Black men say, they say like a woman, like a woman can't be president. If you ran into such a young man, what would you say to him? Anyone on the panel?
There have been female presidents and prime ministers all over the world. The United
Absolutely.
States is kind of bringing up the rear on that. And if you can have a miscreant like Donald Trump in the White House, then surely, I even saw a meme a couple of years ago that said maybe we went a little too far saying everyone can grow up to be president. Maybe we went too far with that. So absolutely, a woman can be president and do an excellent job. And we have someone like Vice President Harris, who has been district attorney in San Francisco, and then the attorney general for the state of California. 1 out of every 7 or so Americans are Californians. Then U.S. Senate from California, then vice president. She is tested and experienced and ready. So that should not even be a question. I'd like to get back for just a second to the trope, if you will, the false narrative that Black men are not going to support or vote for Vice President Harris. Recently, I don't know if you all heard about this, that there were a series of polls that were released about the election in general And a group of polls were basically Republican-sponsored polls designed to skew the numbers, because you have people like 538.com and Clear Politics, Real Clear Politics, and they take the average, the aggregate of the different polls. And so a group of Republican polls masquerading as real polls came out all at once to kind of drive Trump's numbers up and Harris's numbers down. And of course, they're trying to feed the tale that Black men are going to support Donald Trump. But understand that when all is said and done, it might, even if it slips a little bit and it's like 88, 87, 86% for Vice President Harris, she's going to get most of them. And as was already stated, the question is, what are white women going to do? And what are white men going to do? They're the ones whose numbers may be ultimately determinative for this, not Black men. So they need to take that off of us.
Okay, I know that after every election, they talk about the percentages of, races or gender who vote for someone, and always Black men and Black women are the highest percent voting for the people that we believe in, that carry our issues, I would say. If there's anyone who'd like to say something on that subject, please go right ahead.
Saw Monica Watkins' hand up, and she put it back down. I'm not sure she wanted to say something.
Okay.
Monica? Okay, maybe.
No, I don't want to say anything. I was just clapping at his comment.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You know, let me defer to Dorian. Go right ahead, Dorian.
Well, first off, greetings, everybody. Name's Dorian Rogers, State President of the NAACP Maryland Youth and College and National Youth Works Representative for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I'm also a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And I feel like we have to remember a perception and narrative, because I feel like sometimes we forget that narrative is really what drives not just policy, but how we frame our democracy to be. And I say that because when it comes to the voter turnout, it depends on the category, and it also depends on the election, because we can easily say we can vote for the presidential candidate, but what are we doing to pull up for that Congress, right? When we're talking about the House and the Senate, and really access to the ballot, because what this election is really going to turn out to be is who does not show up to the polls. And I think that's going to be a very crucial target audience, because there's so many different elements, whether we're talking about domestic policy at home or even foreign policy, where information is at the tip of your fingertips, and it's as if we have to react to what we see. But what are we doing to not just inform ourselves, to break it down so people can understand it? Because let's be real, not everybody loves political science like I do. I know my students, even though I can get my students, I substitute teaching for government, right? I can get them to enjoy it, right? But it's all in how we bring it back to our communities to then organize, especially to turn out those voting populations. Because I can tell you, for the primary election, for example, in Maryland, well over 10% of the vote for the primary elections was uncommitted. We don't talk about that, especially in the framework of not just media, but in the framework of organizing our communities to get out and vote and talk about policy.
Okay, anyone else on that subject? Okay, let's go to.
I think.
I'd like
Oh,
to
I'm sorry.
Additionally,
Haki, I see your name up, and is your hand up, Holly?
Yes,
Holly
ma'am.
was getting ready to speak. Yes.
Okay, go right ahead, Holly.
Well, I want to take a slightly different take on this subject, and that is to provide, what do you do with the myths, right? And here's what you do. You tell the truth. It's really that simple. And I want to empower everyone who's listening, or who may be listening, or who you might talk to about this call later when they talk about the myths. And I think this panel has done an excellent job of laying out some of the top ones we're currently hearing, whether it's about men, whether it's about white women, whether it's about other demographics. Here's two realities. One, Black people influence each other and they trust each other. Here's another one. So does the rest of the world. So we have the ability to not only influence our own communities, but influence all of the communities that we choose to participate in. And when we combat and say, actually, it's not true, as a Black man, as a Black woman, we are participating and we are active and we are doing the things and we believe that you as whatever demographic group you're representing, also have an important role to play here. And we talk about how the policies that are being discussed through this election matter, and the opinion of the candidates that support the position that you share matters. It changes the conversation. What we have to resist doing is repeating the myths. Instead, focus on combating the myths. We have exactly 2 weeks left before the polls will close. And we already in many of our states have started voting. And so these messages, it's important to state them now. We do not have time to continue to entertain the myths. We have to move straight to the truth.
And may I just add to that, we need to tell the truth as often as the liars are telling lies. Because Donald Trump, when his lips are moving, he's lying. So every time he's saying the same thing over and over again and it gains traction, we need to be debunking it and telling the same truth over and over and over again.
Great. Haki?
Thank you all for being here. Haki Ami again. Well, what I would want to address with this, and I did not address it specifically when we had the local meeting, but there was a article on NBC Black, and the topic was influencers and popular podcasts fuel election disinformation amongst Black voters. Now, I tend to, listen to different podcasts, et cetera, for intel reasons. But it says here, and I'll just very quickly try to name some of these influencers, and they said that they could influence up to 40 million Americans, maybe targeted and fed this disinformation. And they talked about Candace Owens. They talked about the Breakfast Club that recently had Joe Stein on. They talked about Foundational Black Americans and the ADOS movement. They spoke about Rizza Islam. And I'm gonna add to also who, for instance, these people are getting millions of viewers. Dr. Umar Johnson and Dr. Boyce Watkins. Now, some people, they, in their mind, have such a angry position about the Democratic Party, but the alternative is very dangerous at this time. And I just want to mention these few people, but there are a few more, but I wanted to mention them particularly by name to know that sometimes you have to go and challenge these people. And it's like, what are you going to do? And this is how I did it. Although some of them are worthy of some types of respect, they need to stay in their lane if they don't understand the dangers of what a Trump president actually means. And I'll land my plane with that just briefly. Thank you.
All right, I don't see another hand. If there's someone else who would like to speak on that subject, please do. If not, let's go to another topic. Okay, that's still your hand, I believe I'm seeing. Is that a new one? If not, let's go to another subject. What do we do with the person who says to us, I'm not gonna vote, it don't do no good, no how? Okay, Dorian.
Somebody was going before me with.
I don't see another hand.
Okay. Really, to be honest with you, I agree with them. I say, but that's all the more reason why you need to be outside, because if they're working so hard to suppress your vote, whether it's in Maryland, because keep in mind, early voting in Maryland starts Thursday. There's spam texts going around telling people that, click on this link and you get unregistered, right? If they're working so hard to prevent you from voting, then that means that you need to vote, because 9 times out of 10 people, especially when we talk about saying that your vote does not matter, but then they want to voice and articulate the problem. I say, well, what are you doing to organize? Oh, well, I'm going to rallies and stuff like that. So how are you going to translate going to rallies into your vote, which then translates into policy and making sure that the people, whether you voted for them or not, are held accountable? Because, and again, I want to make sure that we don't forget the value of nonpartisanship, because that's the ground that really ensures that conscious voters can go to the poll understanding that it's not just about partisanship. It's about how are you making sure that you understand the system and the game so you can fight for the nation that you want to see. But you can't do that if you don't vote. And particularly with younger people, especially when we talk about mis and disinformation. Again, recognizing that misinformation is when unintentional information is circulated, but disinformation is weaponizing that misinformation, right? We want to make sure we're breaking down the facts, especially when we're talking about everyday occurrences in our everyday lives on each level of government, including our global stage.
Okay, anybody else on that subject?
I'd like to respond to that.
Okay.
At our town hall meeting, we had a very young, intelligent African-American male, and I know him personally. His name was Ari Lewis, and he was asking some awesome questions, and I'm sure you remember him too, Pastor. And I coached Ari when he was like 12 years old. Ari grew up to be an engineer, graduate of North Carolina A&T, working one of the largest construction companies in the country. Has left that and now initiated his own farm. But I say all that to say, Ari has a true belief that his vote doesn't matter. And I took everything in my heart to convey to him that a non-vote is a vote for Trump.
Right.
And then remember, the last election was it 2020 in Georgia, when they had the special election after the general election, because nobody had gotten 50%. And because our voters turned out, they were able to elect the first African-American and the first Jew from the state of Georgia to the United States Senate. Why was that important? Because those votes added to the others gave the Democratic Party, President Biden's party, the majority so that he could appoint a couple of hundred progressive jurists to the federal bench, including Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. And none of these people wanted a landslide. They were close elections. So everyone's vote matters. And that's a tangible example of the outcome when we do vote.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, you've been waiting for a while. Go right ahead.
Thank you. When I hear that and out on the campaign trail, if you will, I heard that way too often, particularly at one polling place, which was during the early voting. It was at a school and they were doing football practice. And so as the young men came out, we talked to them about voting and got a number of negative responses. And this is at a school that is predominantly African-American. Not voting, it doesn't count, etc. And in the conversation about whether their parents voted, some said yes, some said no. But what I realized looking in the district that I serve is this district was formed because out of a larger district, and those from Baltimore County or from this part of Maryland know this. It was a larger district. There was another population that folks believed controlled it, and it did because they had 90-some% of the vote, but they were only 13% of the district. The district was predominantly and is at this point made up of African Americans with Latina act right behind it. So in asking and going to knocking on doors and talking to people, why don't you vote? Why don't you believe in this? They had never seen beyond the election what any of their elected officials were doing for them or with them or hearing them or reaching out or being in the community. So that's important. We have to be interactive. That central committee is critical because it's supposed to be building that voting capacity. We think that when we hear that the Democrats, for example, take our votes for granted, part of that is on us because we come out during election time and way too many of us go away once the election is over. We claim we're doing the work, but folks don't see us out in that community. They don't see us at their playgrounds, at their community events, talking to them about the things that matter. If we want to build that voting capacity, it cannot start during the election time. It must be those years in between. Let folks know you matter to us. Serve. We serve them. A man wrote me about his issue. He said, I don't know why I'm writing you because nothing is going to happen. I've gone through, and he named how many people he'd gone through, and he said, and nothing happens. And I said, well, I'm getting ready to make your day, and I'm going to make a liar out of you as we getting ready to get busy. It took 1.5 days to handle his issue. And he's a believer now. Now, right now, he started out believing that I could find and open a door. And I said, but there are other folks out there. I couldn't do this if there weren't other people out there to help me do this. But it has to start with the work we do. Danyell and I have this conversation frequently because she'll work herself to death. But it is not enough for us to let all of the people who like to go to events get away with that, just that mindset and be recognized. It's about doing the hard work and convincing all of the people in the communities that we really do care about them and that we're serious. We're having issues now with in Baltimore County with redrawing maps. And one of the R's said, I don't know why you're all upset, because look at these numbers. The Democrats could actually come out and win in these two districts that look like our districts. But we have to build that voting capacity. We have to stop going at each other and build that capacity and get people out there and let them see us, see that we're working, even when it is not an election year.
Yeah, and I think you hit that, you're spot on, Delegate. I think that we also, the only thing that I would add is that we also need to just listen. Sometimes they feel like we're talking at them when we go into those communities. And so what I would just add to that is that sometimes when we go into those communities, just take the time to listen to them, listen to their issues before we start talking to them or at them. As coming from almost like a higher place, and now we're going to there, because you're right, we definitely need to start way before election season. I think we need to start and make it a daily kind of job, right, to go out there and see what the issues that they're facing, especially when you're coming from an elected position standpoint. And I think that the main thing, though, is when you listen to their issues, you make sure that you're also educating them on what elected official can actually help them with that issue, so they're not contacting their senator of the U.S. senator for a pothole when that should be their local elected official or council member. So I think that those two components, in addition to what you said, is exactly the right step and course of action.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was
I
Marlon
think-
Johnson.
Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you very much. Who else wanted to say something?
I was just gonna briefly say, there's so much here, it's so rich. But instead of giving you the exact words, I would offer an approach. And the approach is ask questions, listen, and then respond.
Yes.
Ask what is important to them.
Yes.
Listen to what they say, because most folks actually are pretty tuned into the election. They have some opinion one way or the other, and they also have something in their lives that they're very concerned about that's probably keeping them up at night. And then the final step in that is that when you respond in a way that creates a connection, between what they care about, what's top of mind for them, and what's on the ballot. And sometimes that is an issue. Sometimes it's a candidate. And frankly, we need to do connections to both candidates and issues, because when we do issues only, and this requires us to have a lot of different conversations going back to what the other people say, because if we're really transparent about this, what we also have to recognize is the IRS keeps us from having one conversation. So we got to be prepared to have several conversations. Some people, because of their tax status, for instance, C3s and other nonprofits, they're going to be able to talk to you about issues and about the values of voting. And that's an important conversation to have. Then you might have some C4s and others who can then connect the issues and the importance of voting to stuff that's actually on your ballot. And then you'll have others who are actually representing direct interest on the ballots, be they ballot initiatives or candidates or others, that should be talking to you in a way that connects the previous two conversations together. The problem that we have in this community is very few people are going to have all three conversations with you. You're going to get different people having different conversations. So we also need to help folks understand, expect to hear three different conversations. In many cases, it's not that they haven't talked to anybody, it's that they probably have only had one or two of three conversations that need to be had, and they don't understand that they need all three conversations to connect it to, one, their right and privilege to vote, and then who they're actually voting for on the ballot.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Dr. Myers, are you still on? I think perhaps she had to leave. Okay, it is true that the person in our community who says they ain't gonna do nothing, that they haven't asked for anything. What would you say about that to the person? You know, they have not asked for anything, even though they may have worked in the campaign.
I mean, sometimes that's true. And I think someone earlier said, you know, voting is part of the process, but not the whole process. So I think as part of the ongoing conversations that we should be having with our community is, you know, after the election is the accountability portion, and helping people to understand what accountability looks like. It looks like phone calls to your elected officials. It looks like sending letters or emails. It looks like showing up for, I know many of us belong to several organizations in addition to the ones I've mentioned. I also happen to be a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So when we have day at the Capitol, I show up. We have days in our local city councils, and here's one that's really important to show up to: school boards. I show up. If there is a measure or something that has not been discussed in a way that I find favorable, here's one that we've been working on that has become near and dear to my heart, and that's youth mental health. You know, I was very disgusted that in Maryland they cut the budget for the 988 as well as in the District of Columbia. We need those services. I showed up and said, I got a problem with this. Did I get my way? Not that time, but I'm not done. And so I think you have to recognize you don't get everything you want every single time. So sometimes you need to think about, how do you make sure you're electing people who are at least open to the conversation, so you have a shot at convincing them or at least sharing with them your point of view. As much as I go to the Hill, as much as I go to the Maryland State Capitol and my city council here in DC, I know that who I vote for are the people who grant me appointments because I want to be able to have access.
Yeah, very good. Now, the voting early, some of our people are accustomed to, in many things, waiting until the last minute. What is the advantage of advising them to vote early? Anyone?
Early is on time's late, and late's unacceptable. And how I told it to one of my colleagues is, do you wait to cash that check when you know you want to go out and party on U Street this weekend? No, you gonna cash that check in early. Same thing about this, because and then plus it's here because you don't recognize the value of something until it's taken away. And I say this because in Maryland, we get too comfortable, especially given how lowercase p progressive we are in terms of what we had to fight for. Once early voting, if it is taken away, what are you going to do? So take advantage of it, vote early. And then plus, at the end of the day, when we talk about early voting in Maryland, October 24th to the 31st, that's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I can guarantee you that if you're not doing anything on a Saturday or a Sunday, you can go vote early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is Malwan. I just think that when you have a voting plan in place, I mean, because it all starts with there, right? And I think educating folks on having a voting plan and giving them more days to execute on that plan is a strategy that we didn't have before. And we know that they're closed in polling places in communities that don't necessarily look like the demographics that they want to show up at the polls. And so allowing people to expand that day or that access to the ballot box is something that is definitely important as we move to make sure that our voices are heard at the ballot box, right? And so I think when we teach that plan piece and having people to execute on that plan, and that definitely helps them get over the fact that they don't need to just do it on election day and stand in a long line or a potential long line when you have the early voting period to avoid some of that.
And you need to have a plan A, B, and C, because if you go to one polling place and they're having a power outage or the line's too long because some of the machines break down, because amazingly, this thing always seems to happen that there's some of our polls that have high turnout numbers and they don't have enough voting machines and something always breaks down. So what's plan B? What's plan C? If this site doesn't work for you, go to this one. If this one doesn't work, go to this one. Just be determined to cast your vote and don't take no for an answer. The other thing that we need to take advantage of, especially in light of in some places in the South and probably in the battleground states where there are people who intend to show up at the polls wearing fatigues with a gun strapped over their shoulder and to try and intimidate, or to even come up and ask you, are you registered? Do you have ID? That's not their business. So rather than deal with them, vote early, vote by mail. So rather than even going to the polls, you put it in the mail, or what I did, I took my ballot to the Board of Elections. So that way there's nothing about, well, it wasn't postmarked in time. No. I put this in the drop box at the Board of Elections a month before the election. So that way you make sure it gets where you want it to go. But again, that requires a level of determination that you're going to vote no matter what.
And if I could jump in, this is Makita Scott.
Hi, Makita. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. I would say one, of course, like others have said, having a plan, knowing what you're doing. You never know what you may be into, so it's always good to try to do it in advance. But I would also act like I also would encourage others to have an idea of what you're voting on, looking at voters' guides. I know the League of Women Voters has an excellent voters guide. I believe the NAACP also puts one out, but having that information, and they put those out well in advance of the early voting so that you can be informed, know the issues, and be prepared to vote when you go to vote. So thank you.
Dr. Faye? Dr. Faye?
Yes.
Ma'am, my name is Roland Patterson, and I'm having trouble getting my hand raised. I wonder if I might be recognized.
Okay, well, we're ready for you.
I think that in addition to all of the great ideas that have been raised, is the fact that we must know our history. We must know that during Reconstruction, when we were uneducated and had no money, we elected Blacks to Congress, to state legislatures, to town halls, to city councils, so much so that all of the massacres across the South happened to beat us out of governments. It said we were that successful. All across the 20th century, we were rolling back legalized segregation until it was rolled back. Even now, we're dealing with Project 2025 because we got lazy in the Hillary Clinton Donald Trump election, and Donald Trump came back or came to us because of Barack Obama. Backlash. We must understand the pattern. For every advance we have, there's a backlash. And so our votes have counted all across history. Our record of progress is written in stone all across history. But we must just press forward and make our voices heard. And we can't afford to have these mentalities. You know, I mean, put it this way, and I'll stop. Put it this way. Malcolm X talked about the house Negro and the field Negro. Well, the house Negro was on the plantation after emancipation, right? Okay. And so the question is, who are we going to be? That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Please
Anyone
say,
else who
I'm
has?
sorry, Dr. Ife, I was just gonna let you know, we do have Councilman Julian Jones on. I just let some of the legislators know when they came on. I would just let you know they were.
Did we have him or did we announce him before?
No,
Julian
he's
Jones?
just on. I saw that he came on, so we can have him say a few words.
Well, council member, we're having a great discussion here. We were just waiting for you to come with us. So we're surprised, but we're delighted. What would you say to our topic this evening? We're trying to dispel the myths within our communities. Council member? Well, while he's getting ready to come on, let me go to another subject. There are some people in our community who might say, oh, President Biden was so nice. He gave us a woman on the Supreme Court. How did we actually get that woman on the Supreme Court? And I know Holly can answer that up and down and talk about it. But if anybody else wants to talk about it, please go ahead. Because there are people who think it was just out of the goodness of his heart. Oh, come on. Black women, every Black woman must know how we got Ketanji Jackson. We asked for it. We demanded it. We worked for it. We stayed on him. We made him promise before he got our vote that he had to put a Black woman on the Supreme Court. That's
Well, you
that's
told
what
the
happened.
story, Dr. Ife, for sure. You can't
Yeah.
see it, but
Yeah.
behind my head here, I have a copy of the New York Times ad that ran. And I'll be brief here because I do think, and I suspect this is why you posed this question, that this is an example of action and how a group of people can influence decision-making and legislation and choices. We actually had the opportunity to put a Supreme Court justice on under Obama. And we suggested that it should be a Black woman, but there were those that did not feel like it was that time. And I mention that only to say that as a community of Black women, we learned from that. We were not as prepared to be as directed. We were not as organized and had not really put in the work to think about a strategy to support such a candidacy. By the time came around again with President Biden, we actually had put the stakes in the ground long before the opportunity presented itself. And so even as we were talking about in the campaign, things that were important to us, we had this as one of those tenets. As president of Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote, we started in 2018, and one of the key things that we were founded upon was this lack of Black women's presence in key top offices, which at that time included the Supreme Court. So because we had been naming that as a concern from the beginning, we were prepared to do not just vote for a candidate that had already said that they would be supportive of the ideal, but also we started to prepare to do the work that it would take to build the public will to ensure that it could happen. So it's one thing to get your politicians in line, but let me tell you, it helps a whole lot more if you can get your community to line up and show up as well. And so just as part of that process, we knew we had the president. Check the box on that one. But what we didn't know if we had was the Senatorial Confirmation Committee. And so the real work was organizing people from all of the communities, whether they were Republicans or Democrats, to show up, to write letters, to go to their offices, their local offices, as well as their offices on Capitol Hill, to show up when the confirmation hearing was happening, and to let them know that we were all watching and paying attention. And I have to give a shout out to Judiciary Chair Dick Durbin, who was very instrumental in not only helping to move the process along in a way that was resistant to opposition, but also for creating and working with advocates on the outside to create the access necessary so that we could help him help him in the process to keep the pressure up. I want to note here, it takes a lot of things to get a Supreme Court justice. And it takes those same things to get key legislation and to have a real relationship with an elected official, especially one operating at the highest level of government. And while I do think and support that Black women had a crucial role in doing that.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. It goes back to what we talked about in terms of myths. We were able to not only lead ourselves, but lead all communities. And I think Black people need to understand that that's what it takes. We have to be confident and bold in both our leadership within our community and between our communities.
And we were grateful that in addition to Katanja, we got a lot of other Black women in place.
Yes,
over
we
in the
did.
Justice
And a lot of
Department.
Black men too, because I see
Yes.
y'all looking.
Yes. We never work just for ourselves. That's another myth, is that we don't support each other. But I can be just as happy if a Black male is getting a position in government or someplace important as a woman, and we work just as hard for them. So that's a myth that just kind of needs to go away, that we don't support each other, because when it comes to elections, you can see we're out there. Okay, I've seen Dorian's hand for a long time. Would you go ahead?
I may add before Dorian starts, I just want to give a little plug in for Maryland. We did have because we went throughout the states, throughout the US, and Maryland did have a call for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And as a result, Senator Howland and Cardin both awarded us tickets to have individuals actually be there at the hearing. So that's what we did with Win with Black Women.
Okay, Dorian?
I was just going to piggyback and say that, again, we also need to understand that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Because if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the vote was still 53 to 47. And, you know, when we talk about the U.S. Senate, and this may sound like I'm preaching to the choir, but as 100 senators, 53 to 47 is not a pretty comfortable margin, right? Not just when we're talking about and I'm going to put this in air quotations, nonpartisan group of justices, air quotations, right? But how we're, again, holding the narrative. Because what's interesting is when the U.S. Senate debate happened a few weeks ago with County Executive Alsabrook and former Governor Larry Hogan, one of the conversations, I think I brought this up at the local forum, was the conversation about Supreme Court justice reform. Because again, when we talk about our justices in the federal structure, it's a lifetime appointment. But in the state of Maryland, in the newly named Maryland Supreme Court, those are term limits, right? Particularly when you age out, become 70, in addition, 10-year terms. And if you listen very closely, the word choice of former Governor Hogan was as if he was matching them as identicals when they're not. If anything, that actually reaffirmed Alsabrook's point, regardless of where your party stands. But my point, I think, to really piggyback is, what are we doing to continue to organize, not just for our judicial branch, on each level of government, but then also in our chambers, because how Congress is structured, these committee assignments, we don't really pay attention to committee assignments, particularly when it comes to our own representatives. And I live in District 6, so that's Montgomery County, Washington, Frederick, Allegheny, and Garrett. And that's a really close election right now.
Okay, anybody else on that subject? And if not, I want to bring in Roland Patterson Jr., who I understand has joined us. Roland, are you there? And would you like to join the conversation at this point? Okay. Let's go to another question.
Kendrick is on Dr. Faye.
I'm sorry, I don't see the hand yet.
Kendrick Tillman, you can jump in.
Okay, thank you for the help.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Kendrick Tillman, and it's my honor to be here. I'm a husband, a father of two, a grandfather, and I serve in a few leadership roles, as you can see on the screen. And it's been really something that struck me like a lightning bolt called advocacy. And so advocacy has really changed everything that I knew about politics. I grew up in a household that was almost anti-politics. Of course, we always voted, but I still had to go to the people that were involved to ask who to vote for. And as I got older, I realized that policies are how laws can really expand the wealth gap. And I want to show one slide here that kind of explains where my passion falls. And the first slide, as you see, both all three individuals trying to watch this baseball game, where it says equality, where we're all equal. And as you can see, it doesn't look too equal, because you got a young man there that can't see the game. You got a young man that can see the game, and you got a guy that doesn't even need help seeing the game. And if you notice when we're all equal, under that picture that sits above the word equity, where the playing field is level, when the playing field is level, I think that is where advocacy became super important for me and super important for my family, to be able to say I have five votes in one household, from my children still being registered in this household, my grandchildren growing up, and then my wife and myself. It, to me, that really understands intentionality. So you'll hear me use that word a lot. We're very intentional on who we vote for, very intentional on doing the research to find out what they voted for to impact policy for our great state and beyond. And so I'll get off my soapbox, because I think I was just supposed to do an introduction, but I get super passionate about just advocacy and why it's important for us to vote.
Okay, you'll be able to come back and give us all of that good stuff you were just thinking of telling us then. All right, we're going to go to another subject, unless someone has something to say on the one we were on. Let's go to, we have 2 weeks to do whatever we're going to do about this election, although we're not talking about just this election for our community. We're talking about many of the kinds of things we can do to be helpful in our community. But let's just say in the next 2 weeks, we run into a person who says, I don't know who to vote for. How do we respond to that? Well, I could answer it.
I'll respond.
Excuse me.
I had the privilege and pleasure of running for county councilman.
Okay, Derek, thank you.
A few years ago. And as I was working the polls, it just befuddled me that people actually came to me and asked, Derek, I know you, but who else should I vote for? Which told me that they hadn't done their homework, or they hadn't took the time, energy, or effort to even know who to vote for. And that's an issue that we have to work on, in terms of making our community or assisting our community to be more politically astute. And that has to occur not just during the year of a presidential election. I love that video that Yellow Pain did when he actually broke down the three parts of the government. But all year long or every year after the election, and I even started it myself with my god granddaughter. For her birthday, I gave her a book, a child version of the Civil Rights Movement, because I want her to understand how we connect. And there should be a cultural connection between generations that I think is missing. You know, we learned everything, or I learned everything growing up from one of the most interesting educational instructors in my eyes in Baltimore County, who was Joseph Woolfolk. Joseph Woolfolk was my African American sub-Saharan history teacher when I went to Woodlawn. And that was over 40 years ago. So I learned about myself, I learned about our culture, and it just got me involved from that point on to be more astute about our community. And I don't think that's happening. So we have to take the time, energy, and effort to convey a lot of our cultural consciousness amongst ourselves, amongst our kids, because nobody else is doing it and nobody else is going to do it.
Okay, all right. I think, well, Holly had to leave. I believe she's gone now. We thank her for being on. I also want to go to Haki now. His hand is up.
No, just to add, brother Derek, thank you for that. And just the point, one of the points that you made, and I recently heard someone saying that people have made up their mind already. I don't tell people that, like, people made up their mind, because in my experience, at the actual polls on election day, that decisions are made right there from talking to people. I don't know if anybody else have experienced that, but rest assured that votes can be changed like right at the last day, at the last minute. So don't tell people or think that most people have made up their mind. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Okay, I've done that. It hasn't been for the major candidates. I've always known that when I got there. But there are some candidates you'll see on the ballot. You might not have an idea who it is, but you can look at the party of the person. You can, just look at something. Oh, yes, I've heard of this person. I think I'll vote for them, or something like that, But you might change your mind as you get there, or you may not know who's on the ballot for everybody when in a presidential election. Because there's so many things there. Okay, I want to go back to Kendrick now. I see his hand up.
I just wanted to say that each of us needs all of us, and teamwork makes the dream work. So if you are one that does their research and knows who voted for what, so that you have a great understanding of what elected officials ultimately care about, the things that we all care about, by all means, make it easy for the next person, because it's 80% of our population and African Americans aren't probably doing the work. It's 20% that really cares, maybe even less. And so I've tried to make it as super simple. When people come to me, I'll even put a list together, send out text messages, email blasts. I'll go the extra mile for the folks that I know that aren't doing the work, and that's really one of the things that I'm saying this, but I'm also preaching to myself to become more active in doing that.
Yeah. Okay, did you finish, Kendrick? I think. Is there someone else who wants to say something on anything we've covered thus far and you didn't get a chance to make the remark? If not, I want to go to another question.
Oh, if I could talk, this is Makita. I have my hand raised.
I can't see your hand. It must be little.
It's a chocolate hand. Sometimes
Oh,
they
I
get
see it now.
my
Okay.
hand is too.
Okay,
I had a
Vicky.
chocolate hand up, yes.
All right.
I would say, we've used a lot of terminology such as doing the homework and doing the work, but I mean, let's be, I think, real. Who wants to do homework? You do it because it's necessary, but for the most part, people like children, like students, don't want to do homework. I believe that it's incumbent upon the elected officials and those running for office to make themselves known to people throughout the community well before they get to the polls. Some opinions can be changed, but I feel that people running for office should be in the community. As I said, I ran, but I was a community activist and have been and continue to be very active. And people should have seen you, spoken to you, know your positions, know what you stand for well before they get to the polls. I think that we let our elected officials off too easy by not requiring that level of interaction prior to election day. I believe that as a community, we should have more interaction with our elected officials. And I'd say if people are showing up not knowing who to vote for, that's reflective upon the elected officials that represent our community not being active and engaged and vocal and known to the community. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, I see your hand.
Okay.
After Cheryl, Dr. Faye, if we can, after Cheryl, after Delegate Pastor, Honorable Dawn Hester has her hand up, and then I wanted to say something. Thank you.
Well, I'm going back to the question I never got to ask earlier. Okay, because Makita did get back to it. As we're talking about how do you engage people during election times, and as I said before, you do it by the work that is done non-election time, along with knocking on those doors. And Holly said, you listen, she gave her strategies, etc. But what I have discovered as a delegate, very often there are those bills that sit there that get passed around and everybody just knows, okay, I can make a bill. So I can have 900 bills. And that may have already been out there in one shape or another. But the reality is our best bills and bills that matter, that make a difference to our constituents, are those things that, as I think Holly said, are things that are on the minds of our constituents, even those who have not voted or who feel disenfranchised. And when we can take some of those things, sometimes it takes one session, sometimes two, sometimes it takes many years, but people feel good. Just this week, I spoke to a woman who has tried to get a bill out there for 2 decades. And she has gone to every African American legislator, non-African American, and everybody has a reason why they don't want to touch it. And it's strong. It's a strong issue that stays on the minds of a lot of folks. Sometimes we're not going to get them passed, but that means, I think, to which Makita was alluding, doesn't mean we should not take it on. Doesn't mean we should not fight the good fight or verbalize and be vocal for our constituents. And guess what happens very often? We get something that finally someone says, yeah, that happened to me. That is relevant. We have it. Now, not only do you have that person who just thought, nobody's paying attention to me, or I'm not voting, but all of the people who are in that circle, and then that circle gets larger because they start talking about how that happened. That's why we now see so many bills that are named after a family or a victim, etc. So those things are so important. I, again, can't say enough how important it is in a non-elected time and knocking those doors, because I truly can say, look at the numbers, that the number of African Americans who voted in my district before we broke the district up into two was negligible. It was shameful. And when I ran, just because they had a face now and people knocking on their doors, that number went up exponentially. So I could do nothing less but be out there working for those folks. Because if those numbers go down, as Makita said, that's on me. That's on me for not doing the work.
Okay, thank you very much. The next hand we had was Dawn. Is Dawn still on?
Yes, she's on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It was a whole lot I wanted to say, but we've passed up on many of those questions. But I did want to just mention, in the conversation that we were having about individuals coming to the vote for, I think that all of us have to recognize that, as has been said, individuals, some, don't have time to do that research. And they come to rely on us as elected officials. So I've been elected 8 times, so that's 32 years worth. I know who's going to come to me and say, who am I supposed to be voting for? And so my bond with the citizens that I represent is they know that they can trust me to have done my homework on new candidates running for office or candidates. And so that is to the advocacy or the development that I think all of us need to do within our own communities, because in our teaching of why it's important to vote, people are still living their lives, and those lives, for some, are challenging. And for some, it's just, I don't have time to focus on that because I'm taking care of my family and working. But I know Miss Dawn will tell me which way to go. And so in our communities, we need to have more individuals, advocates who will do that, to have that trust piece. But that trust piece we must carry, and also make sure that we are helping them to understand, yes, how legislation gets passed. Yes, I can't be a council person for 1 year and you all expect me to do everything I said I was going to do when I was a candidate. It takes some time because you get a rhythm, you got to learn it. But we have to teach that to individuals as well, because I'm a Democrat, so I'm supporting Kamala for president. She's not going to do everything in 1 year. She's not going to do everything in 2. She's not going to do anything if she doesn't have the House and the Senate.
The Senate.
So, but we have to teach that and explain that to individuals that, the importance of going down that entire ballot, who to vote for on that entire ballot. And yes, your vote does count, because if we don't get so-and-so, we're not going to get anything. And so that, I'm on my horse, but I've been on, I got 2.
All right. Since we're
Interject
getting
for a minute with that, Dr. Faye. I'm sorry, and because I know we have Malwan and then Kendrick. So as we have heard stated, representation is very important. And if we don't have a seat at the table, we are definitely on the menu. And so with that, and then we can't just look at one issue. So with that being said, also too, I want us to talk about and put in this conversation how we can let the individual voters know how things affect them directly and indirectly. So when you're talking, you can also share some of the things that are in 2025. People don't know how that is going to affect them, their family, their children and grandchildren for years to come. So can we also make sure in some of our responses that we let the voters know why it's important for them to come vote? Because we can register 50,000 people to vote and hope that 50 people come out. So can some of you guys also speak to that? What are some of the things that we can tell and share with our prospective voters about why it's important for them to come out to vote that is included in this 2025? And then I know Malwan, and then Kendrick, and then whoever can say.
Madam Chair, the moderator has a schedule here. And You were next to speak, so that's right. But you're not the concluding speak yet. You got into that. But let's say my list has Kendrick next and then Marwan. But if we can go that way, would it be all right with you, Madam Chair?
Yes, it was the chocolate hand again. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
my hand was up first, but it's okay. Kendra, you can go.
Well, I didn't see you first, man. You got to put that yellow hand. There's a brown hand up there, and I didn't notice that.
Yeah, Richard, profile.
All right, Kendrick, if you don't mind, since Marwan is in a hurry and wants to get ahead of you and something, do you mind if he goes now?
I was
Or
going to
do
say he can go right on. I
go
love it
right
when the
on?
king
See,
speaks,
brother,
man.
how
Mr.
nice
Johnson, you all
everybody
right.
is.
All right. Well, I just wanted to kind of echo what Ms. Hester was saying. But I think when we talk about voter education, I think it starts with meeting people where they're at. And I think that nowadays, back, and I don't know if I'm dating myself and some of these people on the call, but when we talked about education, we had Mr. Bill, right? We had a whole cartoon that kind of explained the process, explained how a bill becomes a law, right? And I don't see a lot of that. And then we had newspapers, right? That's where people got their source of information. And so right now, when we're in this space where we're relying on trusted messengers, but when in the social media aspect of it, everyone can be a trusted messenger depending on how influential you are to your followers, right? And so when you look at that space and the conundrum that we're in, it gives the trusted messenger piece even more important role, because we need to make sure that not only are we being honest and truthful and to the followers that we have, but then when we actually post, and our presence on social media also needs to be in a position to discredit the other famous celebrities, right? Like we just saw Antonio Brown come out for Trump. And so those who like him as a football player may just be like, oh, so because he's my favorite person and I got his jersey, maybe he does make sense, even though some of the issues that he has said don't make no sense at all, right? And so I think when we look at from our elected officials, yes, they do have something to play in terms of education, but I also think instead of talking to them from just spaces that they know, that the newer generation not necessarily operate in those spaces. So if you're not on TikTok with your messages, if you're not on IG with your messages, if you're not on any other of those social media platforms that the younger generation are on, then you're missing the point in terms of education. But my overall point is that it's definitely phases, and it needs to start earlier than when we become the voting age. We need to start interjecting civics back into our elementary schools. We need to implore that all these community organizations create voting groups or voting clubs in our high schools, so that way that we are training them to be good stewards to voting, right? And not just saying, oh, we're going to get you when you're of age to vote, but they had 18 years where we have just left them sitting on the bench, right? And so I always like to say that politics is it's not a spectator sport. And so we do need to be in the game, but we need to start that game a lot earlier than we have now. It seems that we've moved away from that. And so in elementary schools and middle schools, we're not necessarily talking about elections and talking about how a bill becomes a law and how it takes more than one election cycle to make that happen. And so, and even when you look at the millennial generation, where they're instant gratification, right? Where they need to see a status update. And so they're not as patient as we were once before, when we understood that it does take time for a bill to pass. And depending on a Congress, you may have a president that doesn't get anything done, or seemingly think or looks like they don't get anything done because they have a Congress that's stalled. But if you don't understand that the Congress is the one that makes the laws, then you may just think that it's all the president's fault, when that is certainly not the case, right? And so I think that we just need to start there and make sure that we are always trying to meet folks where they are, not where we think they're at.
All right, thank you so much. And now maybe go to Kendrick. May we have your permission?
Absolutely.
Kendrick, we're back to you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to really bring up a point, because when I heard Delegate Pastrell speak just now, it reminds us that there aren't permanent friends and there aren't permanent enemies. They're just permanent issues. And what she just said was so powerful. I don't know if y'all caught it. She's saying that there are issues that are extremely important, but elected officials don't want to touch it. And I just wanted to bring home the point that it's so important for us to vote, because if an elected official knows the percentage of, let's just say, African Americans that vote in their district, and all of those African Americans say, this is an issue for us, those elected officials can't say, I'm not touching that bill, because all of their constituents that could vote for somebody else, they now got that elected official's attention. And so it brings home to why it's bigger than not only voting, it's about really being engaged and having a community of engaged voters so that we can really impact policy from a legislative point of view. Because if elected officials aren't touching a bill, that means there's not enough of their constituents that's putting the heat on them. Because we talked about this last Tuesday, every elected official champions a particular issue. So you shouldn't be just randomly picking an elected official for an issue that you don't know that they particularly champion. And so I was hearing delegates speak, and it reminded us that to really make an impact, we got to engage our voters, and then still engage the community of voters so that we can impact policy.
Thank you so much. I don't see, well, yes, I do see Danielle's hand again. She's the chair,
I
so she.
forgot to take it down. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
all right. We're getting ready to start winding down now. So let me just say, these are the things I would like to ask you to address. Everybody will get a closing statement, as it were, not a closing speech, just a closing statement. And there are a couple of things I would like for you to speak to. One has to do with, okay, now we got all these Republicans supporting Kamala. How do we feel about that? And do we think those Republicans are expecting something once she's elected? And the second one is the sister who talked about the school board. Have we talked to school boards about getting civics back in the school? We've talked about a lot of things they don't know, or people don't know in our community. Well, there was a time when I grew up, we had civics in the schools, so we kind of knew how things went when we grew up and when we got a chance to vote for the first time. And then the final thing in your closing remarks will be, okay, you've heard all these challenges, all these things, all these good ideas. What are you going to do about it? All right. And then we're going to turn it over to the chairperson, Danyell, and she can have the closing remarks. All right. Who'd like to start? Let me see your hands. We're closing down now. Okay, Dorian.
So firstly, definitely important that when we talk about civics, we also need to integrate not just the academics, but extracurriculars, student government and student member of the board. We don't talk about those things. And oftentimes we need to remember that with 21st century education, we want to make sure that we have modernized schools, but we also want to make sure that we're uplifting that, especially in civics. In terms of Republicans endorsing Vice President Harris, I think it's important that we normalize the importance of civic dialogue, especially in supporting candidates, and also how that translates to policy. Do they want something in return? Absolutely. But if I learned anything from my grandmother, if anything, it's there's a price tag on everything. But then finally, we just got to remember at the end of the day, it's not a moment, it's a movement. And so it's what you make of it, because your vote matters. Regardless of your party status, it matters.
Okay. Thank you, Haki.
Well, certainly. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great conversation. I just want to, just very quickly plug the Maryland Black Codfish Foundation and our upcoming events in November. And Angela Alsobrook will be the keynote. So we have 14 days of excellence in organizing. So I would just encourage everybody, let's beat the streets. Let's put the bumper stickers on. If you're in the Maryland area, let me speak to the Maryland, get with attorney Mr. Gibson. He has some stickers to put on your car also look for those that, yes, I would hope certainly everyone on this call would definitely recognize that we need to have Senator Alsobrook in place this year. So let's make it happen. And I will see you all soon and around. Thank you for the opportunity. All in for Osterbrook. Thank you, Cookie.
Okay, but we don't want anybody to leave yet. We want everybody to stay.
You're
But,
welcome.
the next person whose hand I see is Malwan.
Thank you, and thank you for having me tonight. This has been a great conversation. To answer your question about the Republicans coming out to support, I think that just means that the politics over party wins the day. I think that we have key issues that we have and that we're facing. I think that doing party line votes doesn't help anybody, especially when you supposedly get elected to serve the people, not your party. And so that's what I'll answer to that. And in regards just the 14 days, I just think that, as you create and execute your voting plan, just make sure that you're sharing that with others and you're taking people with you to the polls. I know from a D9 standpoint, we say we're stronger together. So we want you to take 9 people with you to vote so y'all can vote together. And so that's what I would leave you with. And I would just say good night. Thank you.
Okay, but stay with us.
Yeah, say what you, but good night to all.
Anybody else?
I'll go next, if that's okay.
Wait, I don't see who is Al.
Dawn.
Dawn. Okay, Dawn, you're it.
Okay.
I'm not seeing the hands. That's what's happening here. Thank you.
Raise my hand. I know it's supposed to be reactions, but I haven't seen it on my screen to react. So, but anyway, Republicans supporting Kamala, yes, they expect something because you always something. I hope the initial thing is that we'll have a democracy and we'll be able to all be free. So I think that's the main thing. And for her to govern from the center, which works for me. The civics back in school, that's why we have to make sure that everyone understands Project 2025. There will be no civics in school the way we understand it if we do not make sure that we do the things that are necessary in order to have a democracy and individuals who support that ideal. And that's up and down the ballot. So if you've never thought about running for office, think about running for office. The individuals who are on here, if you have run for office, it took me 3 times before I won, but I was determined. And so it's different now than when I started back in 1996. However, the work that needs to be done is even more vital today, I think, than back in 1996. So please consider that. I'm knocking doors still. Postcards past due because, we got about 10 days. So postcards get dropped today. We don't know. They'll probably get them after the fact. The other thing I wanted to say about voting early was that it makes a difference for elected officials because for those of us who use the Act Blue and the voting, if I know, so I voted on the first day of my early voting in Virginia. And that means that I don't have to get any more calls from anybody, any more texts or any more literature coming in my mail because they can check me off the list because they know I've already voted. So it makes a difference. If you're in a place that really has early voting, we worked hard to get it. So make sure that you do that. It's nice to meet all of you. If you come to know me, take care and let's hope that we're having a good after this section.
Okay, I have on the list Kendrick and then Derek next. I don't see any other hands. If there are, just go ahead and put them up and I'll put you down in the order that you're on. Kendrick? What happened to Kendrick?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go right ahead.
Okay. I believe that we have to be in the spirit of being proactive more than reactive. And I believe that Republicans are being proactive of really understanding who the best candidate is based on policies and bringing some type of normal to our world without racism. I would say that that's our word. Our word is being intentional, be proactive, not reactive. And I think that that's the reason why they're voting for Kamala.
Okay, thank you. Derek?
Okay, in response to the Republicans jumping on the Democratic bandwagon, my belief is that just as Kendrick Tillman has said, that they see the best leader for the country. Just to summarize it, and to be honest, everybody knows and understands our history. African Americans were Republicans in the early part of the 19th century. And that transition occurred, I think, after the Lyndon Johnson administration. The Republican Party kind of ousted us from that party, and we became Democrats. And all that's explained. I'm an advocate of Urban View. I don't know how many of y'all listen to Sirius radio, but I listen to Urban View every day. They have some very intelligent, thought-provoking subject matters on there. And one of his hosts, his name is Clay Kane, and he wrote this book called The Grift, The Downward Spiral of Black Republicans from the Party of Lincoln to the Cult of Trump. Very informative, educational book, political and culturally educational book. If you haven't read it, you need to add it to your library. I'll leave that at that. In regards to civics being taught in school, I don't believe we can wait on school boards to approve civics to being taught in school, because that's not going to happen. I think that's something that we have to do ourselves, in addition to teaching our kids in our community about our own culture. Other communities take time, an extra day and after school programs and on Saturday to teach their kids about their cultures, about things that best benefit them and their neighborhoods. We need to challenge all of our organizations, whether they be Divine Nine or whatever, NAACP, Urban League, whomever. They need to take time, energy, and effort to actually implement some culturally conscious educational components within our community. In regards to the last statement, I think bringing people to the polls, you know, I coached baseball for a lot of years, and my theory has always been not each one teach one, but each one teach nine. And I say that because it takes 9 players to play a baseball game. But the reason I said each one teach 9, because it had a direct effect on me when I went to college, and the ratio of males to females was pretty much 1 to 9 or greater. So that means it was 8 other brothers or 10 other brothers that didn't have the opportunity to get this college education. And I always question why. So it's up to me or up to my community to understand it is my responsibility to assist these young brothers, to try to push them to do the things they need to do to make it a better life for themselves and their community. And I'm gonna end with that. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. We're going to Cheryl and then to Makita.
Actually, Makita was first, so she's had her hand up a long time. I'll wait for Makita.
Sometimes they're so, I can't see them.
Yeah.
But if
I'll
you
wait for
want to yield
Makita.
to her, that's fine. Go right ahead,
I will.
Makita.
Thank you, Delegate Pastor, who was also my delegate. So I'm very happy to see you here and be a part of this with you. I believe you had mentioned me as far as the school board. And one of the things that I was going to say is that it's important who is on that school board. That determines what happens with the school system, and that determines who the superintendent is, who's on the curriculum committee, and things like you were saying, civics in the classroom, what that looks like. We have so many school boards that are under attack across the nation that have, just recently come to light, but it flew under the radar for a while, where people are trying to take away curriculum, trying to remove history out of curriculum, trying to change things. And our children, it does a great disservice to our children. So it matters who you elect to those electable school boards, the direction that it's going to go in, what's going to be in the classroom, and what is going to be in the curriculum. So that those are important positions. It's important to know who is running, what their positions are, where they stand, and also once people are on the school board, to support them there, to show up at those meetings. And I believe she left, but Holly was talking about going to meetings and showing up and letting them know that the community is engaged and involved, and we care about our children knowing about civics and social studies and things like that. So those, thank you for bringing that up, because I think a lot of people don't realize how important the elections are. They want things for their school. They want, certain curriculum in the classroom, but it starts at the ballot, and it starts by educating yourself and making sure that you elect the right people there. So thank you.
Hey, Cheryl.
Okay, well, I'm first of all very happy to have been a part of this and having this opportunity to talk with this group and to listen to all of the things that they've had to say. This is pretty wonderful, and it's encouraging. And what we did tonight is what we need to have happen all the time. And I don't care whether it's with Democrats and Republicans or just the Democrats or whatever. So I'm happy that there are those who are willing to step out and say that Kamala Harris makes sense and what the direction makes sense. That gives us hope. And so we can spend this time making sure we can speak those words as often as possible, right to the very last moment, for the last person who is out there saying, well, I don't know. So we've just got the work to do. So this has been great, and we will continue when we get off of this call to do the work. So that's it. Every level, we've said it, not just the president, but right on down ballot. They call it down ballot. I have to admit, having been on the school board, I hate that term down ballot, because it sounds like all of the other people are unimportant. But as it's been said here, if the president doesn't have the people to support the initiatives and the work doesn't get done. And where do we groom our people? We groom them in our schools. The school board is just that. And so we have to do that work with our children so that they can grow to be those people who are in the middle and the top of the ballot. So we've got work to do, not just in the next couple of weeks, but once the election is over, to make sure that we are grooming each other. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I saw Key's hand. Did you leave? I noticed you wrote a note too. Are you still here? If not, I'd just like to thank each of you for being on the panel. You've given me lots of ideas. I have a radio program on WPFW FM 89.3 every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. I hope some of you will tune in sometimes, but I also hope that some of you will be my guests sometime. I am on the website. Probably the best place is the Dick Gregory Society. .org. You can find me there, or Dr. E. Faye Williams Esquire.com, I believe, is another way to reach me. But anybody knows how to find me.
Excuse
So
me,
just
Doc.
find me. If you have something you want to talk about, I'll be happy to have you on. I'm working on a problem in your concern, I should say, in your city of Baltimore. I'm one of many lawyers working with the Marilyn Mosby case. I have gotten 91,000 petitions signed promising President Biden that he will receive 100,000. If you haven't signed it, I hope you will go to justiceformarilynmosby.com and sign justiceformarilynmosby.com. This is a long story. We're going to remember it. It's going to go down in history, because she's not the only Black female who's catching hell across this country. So this is important. Whatever you think of her, it's not important. It's what you think of our future being DAs or being state's attorneys or anybody who can help to bring justice to our people. I want to thank you so much for allowing me to be with you this evening. I know I wasn't your first choice, but I hope that I did a pretty good job, you know, in bringing out some of the facts. I know, Kendrick, you have your hand up. I'm going to let you go for just a moment, and then we want to turn it over to our chair, Danyell. Please go right ahead if you had something last to say. Maybe he's gone. It was just a note. Danyell?
Can you hear me?
Madam Chair. Oh, okay,
Can you hear
okay.
me?
Yes.
I was wondering if you could put those things in the chat that you were talking about.
I see
It was
you
a
are
What
it was a
specific?
you are
link,
challenging me because I don't.
That you want her to put in the chat.
or have Haki put in the chat. Was I think he was
The Maryland, I can look for it unless Cookie, if you have it, handy.
and her radio show. If you can click on that on her website, so we could have that.
Yeah, my website is easy. It's just my name, Dr. Faye Williams, let's see, Dr. Faye Williams, ESQ.com. And if you can't find it there, then it's the Dick Gregory Society.org, the Dick Gregory Society.org. Both of my websites, both have my name on it. And just ask anybody on the street, if you know Faye Williams, you know how to reach her, they will. Okay, thank you so much. But there are a lot of people who know many of the things I'm involved in. We've also filed an appeal on Maryland's case, and we think that it's going to be successful. But just in case, we want to be sure we get that 100,000 petitions to President Biden before he goes out of office. He has nothing to lose. He has only to gain our goodwill and our thanks to him for pardoning Maryland if we don't get that appeal before he leaves.
Thank you. I just put the link in Dr. Ife, Justice for Maryland Mosley website.
Okay. And if you wanted to put in my number, that's okay. Everybody has it anyway, except somebody who's asking now. It's 202-823-1545. 202-823-1545. And now we go to you, Madam Chair, to send us home.
Hello, good evening again, everyone. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of the panelists. I love you guys. I know that we always say in order to be ready, you have to stay ready. So some of you guys, I called you within 24 to 48 hours and you were there. So I love that because it just shows the support that we have and how willing you are to get out, to talk to the community, to inform and educate the people. And Dr. Faye, you were one of my first choices. You're just such an icon. I didn't know I was going to be able to get you at such a last minute. So again, I love you for that. My call to you, thank you. My call to action is, which is something that we're all already doing. We need to get out there. We need to continue to inform and educate our voters, to continue to be vigilant and share with them why it's important to vote, how it affects them directly and indirectly, and then also lead them to some of maybe the websites or, you know, something that's going on the C-SPAN or the MSNBC or CNN. And while we were going to show a couple of short films today about Civics 101, a video by Yellow Pain talking about the different branches of government, because we hear so many people talk about, well, why didn't this happen? Why did the George Floyd bill go through? What happened to John Lewis? Why this? It's important for them to know. I know what you said, Delegate Cheryl Pastor, about the down ballot. A lot of them don't even know what the down ballot means. So we have to inform and educate and let them know that the House and the Senate is very much responsible for getting that information to the president and the vice president. A lot of them, well, why hasn't Kamala did this? Why hasn't Kamala did that? Well, how much have we heard about a vice president before Kamala came in? Kamala is known around the country, around the world as one of the best presidents we've ever had. So we also have to look at what the ulterior motives are, which some people are trying to put out the different mis and disinformation in our communities. So let's get out there, let's share, let's get the right information into the minds of our people. It's not that people are dumb, it's not that they're uneducated. Someone mentioned before how we have people who are very well educated, who depend on us as their leaders, who depend on us as advocates in the community to be a voice for them to get the information. So that's what I know all of us on this phone are doing. That's what I implore that we continue to do. Tell them to have a voting plan. Tell them to check their voting status, because there are some things that are going on in here in Maryland that are going on in some of our battleground states. You know, let them know the stark differences between some of the candidates. We don't have to tell them who to vote for, but we need to give them the information to prepare them to be informed and educated voters. Like we say in our hood neighborhoods, go let Lottie, Dottie, and everybody know the importance. Yes, we always talk about this is important election, but this may truly be our last election. So we need to name names and let them know who and why they need to go to the polls. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Unless anybody else has anything they want to say.
Yes, I was going to say something, sorry, Danyell. Can you just tell everybody where we'll be for voting and how we need, if people early vote, just to come out and assist and, you know, pass that literature?
Yes. You saw a cookie for saying that. Also, Black Women for Positive Change and Win with Black Women, in addition to the Maryland Dems, where you can go on and register to work at the polls or volunteer, we also have our own, because we want to make sure that we are represented, that we make sure we keep this Senate seat and get Angela also Brooks in. So if anyone wants, I can give you my information or my number if you need it, and I will directly send that link to you so that you can go on and bring your family, friends, anybody. We need early voting starts October the 24th. It ends October the 31st. And we will be out there from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And it's very crucial. You know, you can pick a 7 to 11, 11 to 4, or 4 to 11, but it's very crucial that we're out there, that we have on our shirts that say Harris Waltz, that we have on our shirts that say Angela, because a lot of the people in our Black and brown communities are very visual. And so, like someone mentioned earlier too, is that sometimes that's when you get people to go out there to vote, because while people already have a voting plan, there are some people who wait till they get out there, and when they see us with our shirts on, they say us giving out information. I can't tell you how many times we had to convince people to vote for certain individuals. And guess what? Even though certain people had 66 or 60-something $million, by the time we finished talking to them at the polls, guess who won? And so now we have to get out there, finish the job. As our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, said, let's get out there and do our Black job. Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Reach out to me if you need that information to volunteer.